Welcome, I'm John Glanville, and this is video 36 in the Calmness in Mind series, where we explore sensible solutions for your calmer life. And I've called this video, Is it sensible to be too nice? And I guess I need to add a little caveat there. If calmness and durable mental health is important to you. Why? Why? Because in my experience, the majority of people with anxiety and OCD are nice people. Often they're too nice. Okay, they seem to put the needs of others above their own. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but they are often the people pleasers, and they typically worry about what others will think, and they stress about doing the wrong thing or breaking a rule or letting somebody down. And I know this because that was me 20 years ago. So what I'd like to do is share with you what happened to me as I awoke to this trait within myself and what I did about it. And the first realization I'd like to share with you came early in my process of escaping my anxiety and my OCD from one of my first mentors. And he said to me, John, all your suffering is caused by you, okay? But you're blaming everything and everyone else, okay, for you not taking responsibility for your own life experience. To which I replied something like, of course I'm not, okay? I'm not making my employer mistreat me. I'm not making my anxiety hijack me. I'm not causing all my intrusive thoughts or price rises or traffic jams or people dying. And he just smiled at my naivety and my ignorance, and he said, can you not see that you've been programmed into the perspective that you feel like a victim to what your brain and what your body do, and to what life seemingly randomly throws at you, or seemingly on purpose throws at you? And he went on to say, it can be very different. However, you'll need to see all this content from a whole new context. You'll need a new perspective to live your life from. So I said to him, can you give me an example? And he said, yeah. Let's talk about fairness, and let's talk about being nice. You keep telling me that life isn't fair, and it's not fair that you have to work so hard and you have to be nice all the time, and that you have depression and nobody knows that all the inner pain that you're going through, and it's not fair how much sadness and pain there is in the world. And he said, but John, why does life have to be fair? And why is being nice so important to you? What if fairness was just a concept that was programmed into you? And what if I were to tell you that the world isn't fair? It will never be fair. And that is absolutely fine. Why should it be fair? Because that's just your programmed expectation. What if you're wrong? Therefore, your suffering is caused by you wanting everything to be fair. And he said, how might your life be different if your need to be nice, have fairness, justice, righteousness, decency, politeness, appropriateness, and all other similar expressions? What if they were no longer quite so important to you? Yeah? What if you didn't have an opinion about those things? And back then, in my naivety, I replied, well, you can't just be horrible to a work colleague, even if they're incompetent. And he said to me, why do you use that word horrible? Surely it's only being honest and truthful. If you were to say, this work is not of an acceptable level, and it took far too long for you to complete the task, can we explore how you might become more proficient, therefore of more value to the organization and, of course, to me? And what if how that person reacted, okay, no longer bothered you? Because he said, if you think about it, you are responsible for what you do and what you say, but you shouldn't take responsibility or take personally even how they might respond, as that is their responsibility. And obviously what he said did make sense, though at the time I just couldn't see how I could possibly change. I did, obviously. But he went on to say, your problem is you feel you need to be nice. He said, you think you need to be fair, you feel you need to be liked, and you think you need to avoid conflict or avoiding other people's feelings. He said, and these are just your programming rather than the truth of who you really are or who you could really be. And I said to him, what do you mean rather than the truth of who I really am? And he said to me, sometimes when you're being nice and you're being polite, would you rather be telling them bluntly that you're unhappy with their behaviors, that you don't agree with them, and you wish they would just bugger off? And I said, yeah, sometimes, but surely everybody feels that way and they just put up with it. Surely it's wrong to go into conflict with or judge or criticize or belittle other people. And he said, I don't dislike conflict. He said to me, I don't even call it conflict. I call it asking for what I want, or standing my ground, or just being honest. And what's wrong with any of those behaviors? And of course he was right. What is wrong with being honest, standing up for myself, speaking up for myself, putting my needs first? They were the perspectives and the behaviors of a person with high self-esteem. Now, when I look back on that conversation, in my mid-30s, it was almost as if that was a different lifetime ago. My naivety and my degree of programming to be nice, to follow rules, to fit in, and to avoid upsetting others, it's almost unbelievable compared to how I am today. You might say that my self-esteem back then was very low, causing me to please others in a vain attempt to be liked, as I didn't really like myself. But up until that point in my life, nobody had ever taught me that it was okay to be nice to myself, that it was my duty to love myself, and that it was okay to put my needs first. And really, silly me if I didn't. Now, upon reflection, I see now that those behaviors generated the repressed levels of anger, frustration, and exhaustion, which underpinned my anxiety and depression at that time. So, my concept of self-esteem was driven by how others valued me rather than how much I valued myself. I had unknowingly needed external validation to justify my worth, measured against an internal and ridiculously moral programmed story of who I thought I ought to be. But as I keep repeating, self-esteem is an attitude. Self-esteem is the learned ability to respect yourself and to not let others be disrespectful to you. And you can achieve this by exploring what you want from life and then consciously, positively and lovingly talking yourself into doing it. And then you can further enhance it by accepting other people for who they are, by not taking their comments or actions personally, or by changing yourself, or changing them, or by removing yourself from that person or that situation. Now, people with high self-esteem, they're reasonably comfortable speaking their minds. And typically, their thoughts and behaviors align with who they authentically feel they are. Rarely do they get anxious or depressed unless they are exhausting themselves by working too hard or are very bored. Therefore, we can learn much from people with high self-esteem and people with high self-worth. And I don't mean high self-worth in a financial thing. They just feel they are worthy of anything and everything that they want from themselves. So this is what I did. I copied their behaviors and I investigated who I might be beneath all my childhood conditioning and the various and all the conditioning from the various environments that I was living in, like my home life, my family life, and my work life. And know this, anybody can have high self-esteem, no matter how clever, funny, tall, fat, thin, or however they are. Because self-esteem is just the attitude of being nice to yourself and accepting yourself regardless of anything. Surely if you had a child, you would want that for them, so why not for yourself? As I keep saying, you'll not be able to escape anxiety or depression without becoming a new person. You know? It is being your current self that caused these mental health conditions in the first place. And one more very important observation. The world we live in seems to be designed to discourage healthy self-esteem, thus rendering individuals easier to persuade, control and manipulate through fear, regulation and marketing. This low self-esteem sector of the population in the marketing world are often referred to as the sheeple, a combination of the words sheep and people, which describe people who are docile, compliant or easily influenced. And I think of which many are awakening to how fearfully they were programmed and are now looking to escape that anxious way of living, which of course is what I'm teaching here on this course. Okay, so let's bring in another important concept, and that is about chemical imbalances within the brain being the cause of depression or certain anxiety disorders. You know? And if you are clinging on to stories that your problem is genetic or due to your brain not making the right chemicals, I would urgently advise you to see if you can change this story. And I'll tell you for why. Since my early 40s, I have deeply questioned the 50-year-old medical world's serotonin theory of depression, which proposes that the diminished activity of serotonin pathways plays a causal role in the pathophysiology of depression. And of course, this theory had driven pharmaceutical companies to develop selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which is SSRIs, which we call antidepressants, to remedy this condition. But my experience was that as people thought and behaved in new ways, their depression and their OCDs normally backed off, which demonstrated to me that nicer thoughts, more rest, a deeper connection with life were the key ingredients to chemical balance and regulation, not antidepressants. Now here we are 50 years on, and scientists at University College London have concluded that the serotonin theory cannot be supported by scientific evidence, and that placebo seems to be the most likely factor controlling the limited and variable effectiveness of antidepressants. Wow. And they also commented that pessimism and an unfulfilled lifestyle seem to be the more likely cause of this lack of feel-good chemicals in the individual, which of course makes complete sense to me. Once again, Big Pharma was implying we can fix you with drugs rather than you fixing yourself by living in the manner you were biologically designed to live in. As I said, you know, this had been obvious to me for over 2 decades. I had even stopped trying to convince those who clung fiercely to their it's genetic or it's just, you know, I don't have the right chemicals in my brain stories. I stopped trying to argue with them, as it would just exhaust me trying to get them to even consider it. In my therapy practice, I never take on clients who believe their problem is due to chemical imbalances or genetics. And here's why. I do this out of respect for my well-being. I don't want to waste my energy on those individuals who fight to retain their own limitations. And in addition, many of them were already heavily medicated, likely causing more of a chemical imbalance within them. I hope you can see what I'm pointing to here. As I've said 100 times, it's through living a calm, connected and optimistic life, you might say a balanced life, that will rebalance your brain chemistry and the subsequent expression of your appropriate healthy genes within your body. Now, I'm not going to expand on this topic any further, but I will put a few links in the notes below this video for you to go and do the research for yourself. And I would really urge you to go and do it. But know this, pessimism is clinging to a story that you're broken. And optimism is clinging to the story that there is hope. Okay, that there is hope that you can change yourself. And therefore, I think it behooves you to try. And this shift of context to a new focus of content, along with some new attitudes, once again, is what this course is all about. And I'd like you to observe too, that as you see that change is possible, and as your focus moves away from the anxiety or the depression towards who you want to be, often big changes may be required in your life that the anxiety is currently masking. Things like knowing that you need to move house, end a relationship, get a new job, come off of benefits, stand up for yourself, become more social. Perhaps you need to start saying no to people a little more. Perhaps you need to become a little bit more selfish. And maybe you should start helping others because you desire to help that person rather than feel you ought to. And then also retraining those around you to treat you differently. And personally, I'm encouraging you to embrace these changes rather than to fear them, and certainly to stop putting them off, to stop procrastinating. As I said in earlier videos, a great tip when embarking on new adventures is to adopt the I don't know story. Will it work? I don't know. Can I do it? I don't know. How can you know until you try? And your ego, your little 8-year-old, which is trying to stop you, it doesn't know either. It just thinks it does. It's like the famous hockey player, Gretzky's famous quote, "You'll miss 100% of the shots that you don't take." I spoke with a guy last week who has seriously adopted my teachings, and he's radically changing his life. And he said, "John, I was so nervous standing up for myself, and honestly just asking for what I needed. However, I was shocked how surprisingly simple it was. And once I got going, none of my ego's catastrophizing stories actually happened. In fact, things went so much better than I could have imagined. I didn't realize that it would be so much easier to live like this than it ever was living with all the anxiety and fear that I had in the past." And I say, good for him. He broke free. And I believe that you can too.